pokey trusts, and that's another bill that's up later.
Mr. Chair, I call the Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was on the Select Committee that considered this towards the end of its consideration, not during the earlier parts, and I think it's fair to say that the greatest act of charity in this was actually the parties agreeing that this bill proceed, because although it doesn't do any harm, it actually doesn't do anything. It doesn't. It does. Where's my sense of charity? Well, my sense of charity was just about overcome when I agreed that this bill should proceed at Select Committee, and I've exhausted it. This bill does no harm, but I would ask the member in the chair, or Amy Adams, to take a call and tell us whether there have been any draft regulations made. Has there been any preparation made of any regulations that would give effect to this piece of legislation? Because this piece of legislation now says one thing, and that is that it creates a regulation-making power to do something in the future. It doesn't do anything more than that. It doesn't say anything other than what it does in Clause 4, which inserts a new Clause 28A into the Fair Trading Act to make it explicit that third parties can be required to disclose the amount of the donation which is going to them. The Fair Trading Act already, and the committee report makes this clear, the Fair Trading Act already makes it clear that regulation-making powers exist under the Fair Trading Act, which would have allowed regulations to be required to be made about the percentage of the funds that was donated to charities that was going to other than the charity. What the Fair Trading Act doesn't allow is a requirement that the disclosure be made by the third party who's collecting the donation. So it's a pretty narrow point that's being covered by the regulations here. The legislation, as it came to the Select Committee, tried to do this by way of provisions in the operative part of the legislation rather than in subsidiary regulations. And there was a requirement, according to the version that came to the Select Committee, that if the proportion being retained was less than 50%, then the collector had to disclose that there was a portion of the donation being hived off, but wasn't required to disclose what the proportion was. But if it was more than 50%, then they had to show how much it was being hived off. It became apparent, as the Greens have already indicated, that didn't work in respect of some of the donations, where the first donation might be one of a regular weekly donation every week essentially for forever, and they didn't know how that would work in practice, and therefore they opposed it. So the Select Committee agreed that, well, these complexities had to be worked out in the future. The Select Committee wasn't in a position to work out those complexities. The promoter of the bill, with respect to Amy Adams, hadn't worked out how those were going to be worked in practice, and so no one's done the drafting to work out how that will be attacked in practice. So although this legislation does no harm, it barely passes muster as to what should be passed in this House. Were we being less than charitable at Select Committee, I think that opposition members at least would have said that this was fatuous and didn't actually rate passing into law as a statute. But given that we were charitable at the time, and given that we wanted to help Amy Adams on her aspirations into Cabinet, and we were successful in that regard, we decided that we would be charitable as well. So I would ask the member in the chair to advise whether any drafting has been made of the regulations so as to overcome the complexities which couldn't be cured in the bill, and led to the bill abandoning the attempt to do it by way of primary legislation and left it to the secondary legislation, the regulation-making power, to sort these issues out. So if there has been any work being done, I would like to know. I certainly haven't seen any drafts. That would be influential for me as to whether I should grant my vote for this next reading of the bill, because unless there's an intention to actually put this into practice, it seems to me to be worthless, waste of money, causing the cost of new statutes to be printed throughout the land, only for it to lie dormant on the statute book. So the member in the House, please, could you please advise whether there is any intention on the part of the Ministry to promulgate regulations?
I call the honourable member Dennis